Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our first session for today's Yes Speaker series. Today we're joined by Mo Bofill, Partner and Creative Director at 123 West, one of Canada's leading agencies, who will talk about design in a global pandemic. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that the land on which George Brown College is situated is on the land of the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation and other Indigenous peoples who have lived on this land. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community and on this territory. Across the School of Design, we remain committed to identifying and removing systemic barriers to accessing college programs and services, and are committed to identifying strategies, tools, and actions to better support our Indigenous student population. In a commitment to build connections and opportunities for students to engage with design's visionaries, YES features a week-long lecture series, 18 lectures to be exact. The design-focused speaker series has been cultivated in an effort to provide dynamic perspectives and unique discussion opportunities for members of our community, including students and faculty alike. Honest advice for designers from really good designers connects the School of Design with those who have impacted the industry on a local and global scale through focused thematic-based lectures. This is followed by an opportunity for conversation and dialogue using the YouTube chat. Please feel free to relay any of your questions for Mo there. With that, I'm happy to introduce Mo. She believes that design isn't a department, it's a way of thinking. It's how we approach solving our clients' problems and helping them grow. Design is a tangible expression of what a brand is, and it plays a significant role in transforming brands into something people want to be a part of. Mo is formerly the Executive Director of Design at John Street, where she spent the last 5 years building the design offering from the ground up. At John Street, Mo built a growing design business with an award-winning portfolio and led a diverse team of multidisciplinary design thinkers. Born and raised in the Philippines and growing up in Toronto, she brings a diverse point of view that mixes her passion for design, creativity, and business strategy to Canadian design. With over a decade of experience, Mo has helped transform some of Canada's most iconic brands from the ground up. She's helped transform global brands like KFC, Coca-Cola, Corona, Audi, Subaru, Mitsubishi, and help them become relevant brands to Canadians. She's a relentless optimist. Be kind, do good work, have fun, travel often, and eat more fries, which I can definitely get behind. Outside of driving business growth for her clients, her work has been awarded and recognized internationally by D&D, How Design Awards, Cannes Lion, and the Literatures Archive Communications Award, the Advertising and Design Club of Canada, Applied Arts, Marketing Magazine, among others. Mo also brings leadership and community engagement. She speaks and mentors regularly through RGD, the Registered Graphic Designers of Ontario, is an instructor and mentor at the Miami Ad School, helping create the newly founded design program, and is a leader on the issue of diversity in our industry. Most recently, she also joined the board of directors at the ADCC. Moderating the Q&A portion of today's session is graphic design graduate Jasmine Sealang. Jasmine will be entering the Honors Bachelor of Brand Design at the School of Design this summer. She's passionate about designing for social good, typography, and editorial design. Her thesis project surrounds the idea of providing resources to support BIPOC students in the pursuit of a career in the creative industry, and to educate the parents of those students on the viability as a designer. Jasmine is an active leader in her school community, involving herself with the award-winning typography exhibition, The Pie Project, and the Yes Year-End Show Committee. It's worth noting that the events and programming would not have been possible without Jasmine's support this year. So welcome and thank you, Jasmine. Now it's time to turn over to Mo, who will give her presentation.
Hi, hello everyone. Wow, what an intro, Anna. Thank you for having me, and thank you to those who are out there right now listening to this. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you, George Brown. So as Anna mentioned today, I will be talking about what it's been like as a designer and as a leader during a global pandemic. And we know this is truth. The world has changed and so must we. And this is what's been happening over the past year. So today I'll be talking about how as an industry, so a design industry, as a creative industry, how we need to adapt and evolve. And there's actually 3 topics that I'd love to talk to you guys about today, and under which of things that I have learned over the pandemic. So the first topic that I'd love to talk to you guys about is around the idea of the anti-fit and outliers, why hiring anti-fit and outliers are critical to diversity. The second part is talking about why we must work differently for better accelerated collaboration. And then lastly, and this is something that's very important how I lead, is the importance of why leading with empathy leads to better and more effective work. And I would say more fun work. So as Anna said, I'm Mo. I'm the newest partner at 123 West. I'm based in Toronto. 123 West is now I'm helping build our offering nationwide. I actually started here only in October, so I'm quite fresh. So during the pandemic, I actually did switch my careers. I didn't realize that Anna's intro was so robust. So this is I'm gonna just talk quickly about who I am in 60 seconds, because I know she's mentioned a lot, but I like mentioning a few things. I was born in Rojas City, Philippines, born and raised in Manila, moved to Canada when I was 10. And I mentioned where I'm from just because who I am as a designer and as a leader is heavily impacted by the culture, by the Filipino culture, and how I was raised in terms of, being built around community. I loved art, took a lot of art classes in high school, and I essentially fell into design. So I studied at York Sheridan Design. My first job was an intern at Characters DDB. We learned a lot about how design actually plays into communication and advertising. So that's actually how my entry point into advertising was. And then obviously I was at Zulu previous to John Street. I spent 5 years there as their design director. I burnt out, freelanced for a bit. Built a design offering, as Anna mentioned, when I was at John Street, and now I'm a partner at 123 West. So the work that you actually saw flash through your eyes are 5 years of the last 5 years of design work that I've been privileged to have been a part of. A massive team worked on that. So now you have a bit of background about me. We're going to talk about the topic at hand. So we know this, last year, collectively, we experienced a global pandemic. The world blew up on us, and we've lived the majority of our year in quarantine over this last year and a half. We are in our third, fourth, fifth lockdown right now. We stayed home, we work from home, and it's been a roller coaster of a year, definitely for me. But what's been amazing to see is that how we continue to adapt as people and evolve as businesses amidst this craziness. Personally, for me, there's a lot of sleepless nights, even though I am a very much a self-proclaimed optimist. I've had to struggle with a lot of anxieties throughout the year, anxieties about, myself, my family, work, and what was happening in the world throughout this year and a half has definitely affected me. So on top of that, obviously, we know this, our economy hit a recession in May 2020. So not only did we actually deal with a recession, but collectively as a group, we're also experiencing mental health depression and social withdrawal. So throughout this entire process, as a group, we are experiencing this. So how are we now continuing to adapt and evolve? And what about the design industry? Well, like many industries, it was definitely unprepared for what was to happen over this year and a half. Although we responded, I would say, I ran 2 agencies, John Street and 123 West, through the beginning of the pandemic. It took a lot of effort to do so, and a lot of definitely learning and iterating and learning and working as a team. So although this year did offer a lot of endless learnings and points that I'd like to reflect on, there are the 3 important lessons that I've learned. So the first section I'm going to talk about is the importance of why hiring the anti-fit and outliers are so critical to diversity. Advertising and design is an industry that is criticized for its lack of diversity. This is true. This was definitely exposed even more so when the Black Lives Matter movement began. I can say this personally, as a woman and a woman of color in this industry, so I will speak about design and advertising, there weren't many people that looked like me in advertising, definitely not. I would say there was 2 or 3 women that I looked up to growing up as a designer, but there's even less so in leadership roles, right? So this year, our industry definitely has been challenged and forced to change. I don't know if many of you know this, but it's within the design and advertising industry, but a group of people called POCAM, so People of Color in Advertising and Marketing, they released a call to equity. And essentially it's a call in which there are 15 to 17 things in which an agency or a workplace need to change to be able to accommodate for inclusiveness, diversity of thinking in their staff, but also in how they produce work. And the thing is, in order to do things differently and work differently, we need to hire people who think and do things differently than us. I'd like for you guys to look at your own agencies or even in your own classes, in your own studios, to see how, representation in gender, in socioeconomic class, and different backgrounds and cultures, what that ratio is. And I would say in advertising, for example, for about half of my career, typically I was either one or two women in the creative team. I've been in leadership conferences. I was in a global leadership conference where out of the 75 creatives, these are leaders around the world, I would say CCOs, I was 8 of the 75 women, and 3 of them were women of color in leadership roles. So we definitely have a long way to go. 123 West, our team definitely rallied. We formed a diversity and inclusion team. We educated ourselves, focused on processes and ways in which our agency can be more inclusive. But the work, there's still a lot of work to do. And a more inclusive industry means we need to do things differently and work differently. What does that mean? We actually need to change the makeup of our staff. We need to hire people who think and do differently than us. And I'd like to call these people the anti-fit and your outliers, right? These are, people who typically does not fit. People who may be opposed to a policy or activity or an idea, or people who are atypical within a particular group. So this isn't me saying, hire people for the sake of being different, but rather hire people who will challenge how you think, who will challenge your process and ways of working. Hire people who are in parallel industries that may bring something different to the table. We know this famous quote by Einstein, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So if we keep hiring people like us, how do we expect to come up with that original idea? How do we expect to come up with something different? Humans are tribal by nature. We connect with people whom we have stuff in common with. That's instinctual. People hire people and surround people with people who they're comfortable with. So therefore, they hire people who think like them. But we need to move past that when we're looking to build and rebuild our teams. We shouldn't be hiring people who look like us, who think like us, who go to the same schools as us, whose portfolios look like everyone else's. So this is a practice that I've been actively doing. I've just mentioned earlier, we're building a team here in Toronto. 123 West is based in Vancouver. We're definitely a national agency, and the people we're hiring from. Actually, the good thing about pandemic is that you're now able to hire from different places. So not only are we able to hire outside of Canada, we're also really looking quite hard at looking at parallel industries, because there's some positions where you can engage different types of thinkers. So for example, a project manager that we just hired didn't have her background in advertising, but rather we looked at her resume and said, you know what, you have parallel skill sets. We love your dynamism, your smartness. There's something there that she can apply to this job. So we're definitely making sure we're truly looking at people who think differently than us. Because aren't these the people that we would want to hire? The ones who think outside the lines and actively reshape the status quo, the ones who think completely opposite from us, are the ones that's going to get us to something original. And these are the anti-fits, right? Like the anti-fit are essentially people who look at a world through a multitude of lenses that's different than yours. And that's the important filter that we need to look at when we're hiring. And they are also the outliers, right? They are creators and innovators who will challenge how we work and help build our clients' businesses for the better. I think I'll speak to this later on. I would say in advertising, the process of design and advertising has been fairly similar over the last few years, to be honest. I would say even decades more so. What we need to do is challenge the way we work, and we need to adapt to the new worlds. And the thing is, the diversity needs anti-fit and outliers, right? We need to search different types of pools to look for them. What we've learned in this world is that it's definitely a lot more easier to look outside of the existing pools that we're in. And by doing that, we can definitely make diversity a competitive language. So with that being said, hiring diverse talent is one step. I know that that's something that a lot of our agencies have been doing over the last year and a half. But these are actually some key takeaways. Now that we're hiring people who are diverse, who think differently than us, the bigger effort actually lies in retaining and nurturing that talent. And these are 4 ways in which I felt was really critical in terms of keeping that talent and making sure that they're set up for success. So the first part that I'll want to briefly talk about is actually the difference between sponsorship and mentorship. I'm a big supporter of mentorship. I mentor at RGD. I mentor currently at Remix Project and Artworks Toronto. I mentor at Miami Ad School. And mentorship really means, helping your mentees with their skill sets and teaching them skills. However, what people of color, what people of different backgrounds need is actually sponsorship. So, for example, a sponsorship actually means helping people who don't have people like them in the industry and helping them navigate through an industry that doesn't really represent them. That's what sponsorship needs. And I think that's the really important takeaway is once we have these people in the door, making sure that they have the right sponsors to coach them through an industry that typically isn't representative of them. The next piece of learning that I learned from is the idea of creating an environment of growth and openness and allowing, so this is the important part, and allowing essentially for that learning curve. So what you're gonna find is when you're hiring someone from a parallel industry, across different countries, different cultures, there is going to be a learning curve. It's gonna be hard. The first 3 months and 6 months of onboarding is going to be hard. And I know that we are in an industry that celebrates speed. We are an industry that celebrates thinking on your feet. We now need to really recalibrate ourselves to make sure we allow for that environment of growth. And then lastly, remembering that representation matters. So for me, it has always mattered, but it actually, the weight of representation mattering didn't hit me until the last year, to be honest. Over the last year, I have been much more visible in our industry, in advertising, doing a lot more, speaking engagements like this. And what I realize and what I'm learning from that is I'm getting a lot of young people coming up to me and saying, "Hey Mo, it's so great to have met you or learned about you because no one looks like you in the field that I'm in." There's not a lot of Filipino leaders, not a lot of Asian leaders in our industry right now. I think more and more so, but representation matters, and the reflection of that representation definitely matters. If you can see it, be it. Right now, there's 3% of women in leadership roles in advertising, and less so of women in color. So that was the first part. The second part that I wanted to talk about was this idea of what accelerated collaboration has created during the pandemic. How must we need to adapt as designers, and how we need to work differently because of this accelerated collaboration. This past year, I'm sure across industry, we were getting much smaller budgets. There was a lot of uncertainty in terms of, clients and businesses being able to keep themselves afloat. So spending money on advertising or design has even gone smaller. Actually, even smaller still. On top of that, we needed to be reactionary to what was happening. during the pandemic. So therefore, the timelines were even tighter, because sometimes when you had longer lead times on certain projects, because of the pandemic, some of those projects may come to a halt and you have a new brief and now you need to deliver within the next couple of days. If I were to speak specifically about design, so this is, typically a comfortable timeline for a redesign of a brand or a brand transformation, you could say you could do it in 24 weeks in an ideal world. That's from brand strategy to visual identity to launching a campaign. It can take about 6 months to a year. But in fact, over the last, I would say, year, 2 years, some of those processes have been compressed to 8 weeks. So I've actually participated in a lot of rebranding and design in the last 2 or 3 years, where a full brand needed to be done with 8 weeks. So imagine that strategy, design, and execution to brand guidelines in 8 weeks. That you would think that was quite intimidating, but I would say even more so over the pandemic. Having to do a full redesign in 4 weeks. The last client that I worked on before leaving John Street, I think it was DoorDash, and they needed a campaign in market in 4 weeks. What does that mean? Full strategy, full brand identity, sorry, not full brand identity, but full design system for a campaign to launch. So imagine the pressure, smaller timelines, tighter budgets. That's a lot. That's a lot to take on as a designer. And on top of that, the demands of our business, our clients' business, and consumer expectations have just gone higher and more, right? Brands now demand for more consistency, because this as designers and people who are in creative world, everything now lives in very many different touch points. How do we make sure your brand is consistent? Clients and consumers expect higher level of thinking. We need more involvement. Problems are becoming more complex. There's more touch points. Consumer expectations on the brands are ever changing. How a consumer feels about you as a brand is ever changing. And throughout this past year, throughout these cultural shifts, there's also ever changing mindsets. So I would say kudos to everyone here, how we have survived and learned from the year and a half. The amount of pressure that we underwent over this last year has been immense, to say the least. So that's definitely a lot to handle and a lot to take in as a designer, but also as a leader. So net is that how can we deliver against these crazy expectations? And the thing is, we need to change how we work. We need to evolve our processes and our structures. We need to adapt to the changing needs of the consumers and our clients' business. What does that really mean? I would say, I've worked in a lot of different types of agencies, both big and small design studios, and how we structure a creative process. So for example, if we were thinking of a design process for a brand, you'd have a strategist, a designer, and a copywriter, an account person kind of, act as a team to do that rebrand. And then it gets passed on to marketing, where you have an art director and a copywriter and a creative director executing against a brand, and all of these layers. So what we need to do is consistently actually challenge that process and challenge that thinking. So I'm going to actually plug and quickly talk about one of the reasons why I went to 123 West was because the way we shaped how we assembled our team was quite different than how other agencies do it. And we call this approach under the whole idea of we focus on low overhead and high talent. What does that mean? Meaning, instead of spending our dollars on the fancy offices or all the things, all the frills that you would typically get in a studio, we actually focus all of our money in the talent. So, for example, we don't have a physical office in Toronto because there's no point of it yet. But even in Vancouver, one of our shops was actually for about 2 years when we first opened up at 123 West, the office was within a laundromat and they didn't pay rent. So again, investing it in the talent. And how we're structured is we actually have 15 working creative directors. So what does that mean? So typically in a studio setting, a design studio setting, or an ad agency setting, you typically have creative directors, and then there's layers of levels underneath, right? Like you have associate creative directors and design directors. You have junior designers, intermediate designers, senior designers. The way we work as a team is we actually have 15 creative directors who autonomously look after the work that they're in. So our very core team is very senior. And how we do it is we cast the right people for the right project. So no one is a clear oversight. No one is funneling through anything. We have very much empowered teams. And throughout that, we have a very, very strong culture. So because those teams can work autonomously, can now tackle different types of projects. It's in its own autonomous way. And what I would like to speak about that and why that process work, or why that team dynamic work, is that, I set it up earlier where we have a lot of compounding pressures to perform faster, think higher level thinking, and executing faster. How do we now assemble teams that can execute against that? So the 4 key takeaways that I felt throughout executing through an accelerated collaboration is, 1 is accepting that our processes can no longer be static. So typically, this is us designers, we are very much systems oriented and process based. We create systems and processes so that we can follow them accordingly. But I would say over the last year and a half, what we have to do is really accept that we need to consistently be making sure we're adapting and iterating on those processes. So that's the second part. The third part that I learned throughout this process of accelerated collaboration is that we need to experiment and fail faster. As designers, we definitely want everything to be perfect and produce that perfect brand. And I think it's now important that, we need to be able to accept that we can put things out there that are imperfect. Now that we live in this digital world, right? You can put things out there that are quite imperfect, but then learn from your consumers. So for example, I know this is probably a lot of the designers are gonna cringe at this. Do you produce an imperfect logo out there, put it out there, learn from your consumers, learn feedback, and then iterate based on that? So to give you context, when I was at John Street, I was working on a brand over a year and a half. And the identity over the year and a half, we launched it in, I would say, in quarter intervals. It kept evolving and iterating because we were learning that, 1, for example, we needed to work on different platforms. Second, the business service changed, so we needed to evoke a different type of feeling. But because of that process, what I learned was, when you're building brands in 4 weeks, 8 weeks time, you're learning as you go and you're able to iterate and experiment faster. And then lastly, one thing that I learned about working in a pandemic is that no assholes allowed, pardon my French, but accelerated collaboration works the best when you're working with people you like. So you can't have egos, you can't work with jerks. And that's so critical in terms of, collaborating with people with an open mind and truly a collaborative spirit. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is, I would say, the most important lesson I've learned throughout this whole this year and a half is the value in leading with empathy. The pandemic definitely showed us the importance and impact of great leadership. If you guys look back, March 14th, 13th last year, the amount of pressure for a leader to help navigate the businesses that they're in, to making sure that all of their employees felt safe, that all the employees had their jobs, that the business was still in a good shape. It definitely demanded a lot from leaders, I would say. And this past year was definitely a time when we looked to our leaders the most. And what we really needed from them was actually less concern of their own selves, so less individualism, and rather more collectivism. So more thinking about the group. And I would say this is true, that our industry is often criticized for prioritizing the bottom line, celebrating fame and fostering ego. We are very much a competitive group of people, studios and agencies pitch against each other. We enter awards. We're always in this state of constant improvement and competition. And naturally, this kind of environment definitely breeds that individualistic and not inclusive environment. At the very and for me, that was something that was really affecting me. I would say in very early last year, when I could see that in some, whether it's in advertising, some leaders where the benefit of the business and the bottom line overpowered the people. Late in the fall last year, last October, I did write an article because I saw either some colleagues or I was noticing in our industry that this was quite present. I wrote an article about the challenges that we currently face within our creative leadership, and this is one of the things that I wanted to let you guys know is also that, the people and the person at the top of the businesses, whether it's in advertising, design, any industry, they establish the culture and values of the companies and the team that they lead. And this whole article essentially talked about how, I would say specifically about creative leaders, creative directors and design directors often get into leadership roles too fast. They get the notoriety and fame and suddenly they're promoted and now they have to lead. And what I really wanted to challenge the industry was, do we actually place more value in the creative output? So what does that mean? Can that leader, that design leader, can they get to great work? Can they get to work that drives results? Can they get to work that wins awards? What have they done? Or do we place more value in humanity? Do they treat people with respect? Do they inspire us to be better at what we do? Do they inspire us to be better people? How do they treat people? So which do we actually value as an industry? And I would say for a long time, our industry definitely valued the former versus the latter. And the thing is, what we need to do is really separate those two aspects of a leader, because a great creative person, so a great designer, doesn't necessarily mean you are a great leader. So you may have all the talent in the world, but that creative leader or designer may not necessarily be a great leader, a leader who exemplifies empathy, a leader who supports their team, who has their back. I think we need to start separating those two and actually really looking at our leaders and how they help navigate us through our day-to-day. A little bit of a plug. So this was some of the things that I put together. It was basic questions on, how to help determine whether or not you're working for someone who's a good leader or a bad one. When I read it, it sounds so common sense, but I had to put a test of, some leaders that I work with. Do they actually pass the test? So first question I asked was, are they good people? Are they actually helpful? Are they collaborative? Are they genuinely nice people? Second, are they a jerk? Are they an asshole? Do they actually create a toxic environment with their toxic behavior? Third is, do they have my back? Did they champion my growth and my progress? Do I trust them? This is a small thing, do they say I versus we? So this is when I say individualist mindset versus a collective mindset. Do they take the credit when things go right and abandon you when things go sideways? And this is the last question that was a test for me, when I grow up, if I were to think, of 10-year-old Mo, are they the leader and person that I want to be? Are they somebody who I aspire to become? And for me, one of the pieces of advice that I've ever gotten that was very important was, don't follow the money, the role, the status, but rather follow the people. Follow the people at the top. Follow the people who will push you, who have your back, who will nurture you, who will essentially get you to become the creative and leader you also aspire to be. And we definitely need less ego and more empathy. And I think, this is one of the things when I'm hiring. So right now, I'm going to put a plug here. 123 West is hiring. Actually, all all levels, strategists, account services, designers, art directors, creative directors, all the people. So definitely give me a shout. I think I left Anna should have my email, but also you could reach me at Mo Bofill. This is one of the filters that we have at 123 West when we're hiring. I would say you need to have good work and good character. Good work is table stakes. Talent is table stakes, meaning your skills should already, for you to be at the table, you should have been honing in at your craft and skills. But it's really good character, in my opinion, that defines great talent, right? What does that mean? It means it's the optimism and the attitude to do great work, but also be just a good human, And I think there's a lot of students in this this video right now, and I get a lot of students ask me, about their portfolios. How do we create better portfolios, or how do I stand out as a student? To be honest, for me, after understanding that you have good work, hearing about your passion for design, your passion for creativity, your energy is 80% of that. I would say 20% is talent, 80% is attitude and optimism. So not only is that great for who we are, but we also need to expect not only good work, but also good character also from our leaders. As an industry, how can we train our bosses to become better leaders? How can we give them the tools, the training, the support, and the structure they need to be, so that they can be the leaders we need them to be? Because for me, and I think this is what we need to demand from our leaders, and what I've learned in the pandemic, is that leadership is about honesty, transparency, and constant improvement to realize your purpose. So during the pandemic, making sure as a leader in creative, people understood and knew that, for example, is my job safe? Is the business in good order? What can we do to help? Now helping an agency navigate through a pandemic needed to have all of those things. So this is one of the things where, it's not just about leading with empathy because we're in a pandemic, but to be honest, it's leading with empathy because that's what it means to be human, right? We always need to lead with transparency, humility, and urgency. This is something that's quite important for us at 123 West, is really putting people over profit. Over the last year and a half, what we did was we made sure that our entire staff was, granted, we were quite lucky that we were able to do this, but the first priority was making sure that all of our staff was employed and that they felt secured and safe at their jobs. And throughout the entire year and a half, we're still going through it. We're always making sure that the staff understands where the business is, where their jobs are, and where we're going and what we're doing to make sure that we're navigating towards that. The third part is just understanding and being compassionate. I mentioned it earlier, we are experiencing the pandemic differently as individuals and groups of people. I have different types of anxieties than the next person does. And as a leader and a fellow colleague and person, is understanding that not to be hasty with decision making or judgments, is how do we how do we make sure that we exude that compassion and understanding that people may not be in a good place right now? So how do we make sure that we put that filter on when we're interacting with people? And then lastly, it's very important to connect in meaningful ways with each other. And I think that's quite important of an industry, in an industry that is typically fast-paced, always about the bottom line. How do we make sure that, one, as designers, we're connecting with consumers in meaningful ways, meaning our brands that we build are connecting with consumers in meaningful ways, but how do we connect in meaningful ways with each other as well? And I figured I would end it with just one final thought. And this is a challenge to everyone out there who is not in a leadership position, but also leaders within themselves. How can we hold our leaders accountable, not only in how they deliver business results, but actually in how they treat people? And I think this is even more so important during a time when we're still experiencing this global pandemic, because I know that this word has been thrown out a lot in this presentation, but I would say it's also been thrown out a lot throughout this last year. It's, empathy is not just a buzzword, but it's actually the human thing to do. And sometimes being nice actually goes a long way and will deliver business results. So thank you. I think that's it for my presentation. I am going to unshare my screen.
Thank you so much, Mo, for that totally inspiring talk on design in the pandemic. And I think it's so relatable and such a relevant topic to all of us, especially on the topic of leadership and diversity as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jasmine.
So I'm actually going to take a couple of audience questions first, and then I'll dive into some of the questions that I prepared for you.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the first one comes from Ava, and it says, as you were talking about execution and failing, how long is the design timeline from process to the final when working on a project? Does it give you enough time to fail and start again, especially with the condensed timeline?
No, there's never enough time to fail, to be honest. As you can see, never in my career have I ever had to do a rebrand in 4 weeks, let alone 8 weeks. And that's what I've been doing over the last 5 years. So first answer is there's never enough time to fail and start again. But what's important is when you do fail, and I know this is going to sound super cliche, how do you learn from it and iterate? And I would say the good thing about failure is that it forces you to think outside the process. It challenges. So let me. How many things have I done that has failed? A lot recently. I'm trying to think what the most recent one that I'm experiencing right now with this campaign. In terms of what I love about failing is that it allows for that experimentation, Ava, and it allows for you to make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes can be something that pushes the concept. So for example, there was a brand project that I worked on that was initially supposed to be an 8-week process, but throughout that process, the client said no to every single concept. And essentially, it was a result of there were 8 clients with different mindsets, not aligned vision. So that was one. The other part was, there was miscommunication. There was too much levels and hierarchy. So that was one. And then last, one of the things were we were just moving so fast that we were making mistakes. So you could say that project was a failure, but rather I saw it as after 1.5 years coming out of it, like looking back now, the results were definitely way better than where we started, I would say. And essentially, as long as you're always in that mindset that you're continuously adapting and iterating, it shouldn't feel like a failure. For me, it's just making sure you always have that openness, because it's so easy to get really discouraged, to be honest. And I think that's your biggest battle, because at the end of the day, both, whether it's you and the client, you're in the same team, and you're trying to, you have the same intent, meaning you're going to put the best work out there. The perspective of what best means is different, but you're in the same goal. So as long as you're continuously pushing as a group, I don't think that you'll see failure.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I love what you said earlier in your presentation, fail fast. And something that I've learned from one of my professors in design school is fail fast and fail often. And use that as an opportunity to grow and learn from your mistakes as well. So it's great. I'll take the next question. This comes from Roman. How transparent are you with your potential clients regarding decentralized team structure? How can you ensure consistency in the quality of your work?
Great question, Roman. Super transparent. So those 6-7 slides that I share are actually in our actual pitch decks. So this is, so what it's actually our point of difference as well. So when I say, always be transparent with your clients, you do it from the get-go. You're making sure that you're transparent about your process and how they're working, how they're going to work with you on the project together. So definitely, it's something that they come to us for. I'm not saying that this structure or process is the way to go. What I'm saying is, figure out different processes and ways to approach different projects, and that we shouldn't be static in how we model our agencies. Because even now, I could say this. I don't know. Yeah, I could say this. Even now, the way that, even though that's our model, the way we work with different types of clients are actually also different now. So for example, sometimes we collaborate with other agencies. So most agencies, you would think that that's like, oh, that's weird. What do you mean? I'm like, no, like we both have different types of skill sets and talents as an agency. For this pitch, it may work for us two agencies to collaborate together. So even things like different things like that, we even challenge. So for me, the takeaway is just really just always question the way you work, because you may be able to adapt and iterate for the better.
Yeah, I love that answer. And on the topic of transparency, I wanted to touch on a point that you made towards the beginning of your presentation about diversity and inclusion and challenging that within the industry. And we talked a little bit before the session about my thesis, and I think it ties really well into that. So I'm going into the questions that I prepared for you now. I remember doing my thesis in the research and looking for people that represent me and how that plays a part in the industry. I remember doing Google search on like women designers, seeing very few, like Ellen Lupton and a few others, just like the legends in our industry. But then doing a search on Asian and Filipina graphic designers and seeing almost none. And I recently came across you and another mentor of mine, Eunice Joaquin, and they're the only people that I've really known and have only known recently. So my question for you is, do you have any words of encouragement for women and women of color designers interested in design leadership roles?
Yeah, I mean, to give you context too, I didn't actually, so as someone who is a Filipino, who is a woman of color, of Asian background, because of my culture, it's inherent for me to be a bit more introverted and less vocal about my work. Like it's one of those, it's that humble brag or that imposter syndrome, all of those things, right? Like, I don't know if you feel this, Jasmine, but like for me, for a big part of my career, I didn't like to share my work or talk about my accomplishments because I was like, oh, like who wants to hear about that? I'm like, why? But then the women who I admired back then, so this was, Helen Pak, Judy John, they were Asian CCOs that were out there that were talking about themselves. And I would say over the last 2 years, I've done more of a push to do that. I didn't realize that it was so ingrained to me to be become more of a spectator rather than somebody who who was at the forefront, just because for me, I didn't think that, one, is there a point for me to be out there, to be talking, and what else can I actually bring to the table? I didn't think that I had much to bring at the table. I don't know, in my own like insecure self. And I think the best piece of advice I would say for, anyone who is, who don't feel like they're represented in the industry, or one who feels othered, is that your story and your voice matters, and saying it matters even more. I remember at John Street, when I was promoted to executive design director and being part of the leadership group, I was sitting at the table, who were predominantly Caucasian, who had 15, 20 years more experience than I had. And I was like, well, what can I bring to this table? And filled with insecurities. But what I realized was I leaned into my strengths and who I was. So I was the only design lead at the table. I was the only one who can speak confidently and expertly about design, was one. But also my background, so leaning into me as a woman and a woman of color, those types of perspectives, how that added a layer and points of views that they didn't have. So that's also a piece of advice for everyone out there, is that lean into your stories and who you are, because you do have a filter in which you see the world that is so valuable right now, more than ever. So it's always about, for me now, I'm more encouraged to share. I know it feels, sometimes like I feel really weird still saying like, oh, like I'm doing this thing, but it, I'm like similar to your experience, Jasmine. Like I wish other leaders who looked like me were more vocal back in the day, because then I had more people to aspire to.
Yeah, it's almost like using what you know about yourself as an asset.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I want to dial it back and talk about designing the pandemic, since the basis of your talk. I wanted to ask, now that you've spent about two-thirds of the year at your new role at 123 West, how's the transition been into your newest endeavor, especially like working at home, and how you've adapted to that, since that was a large topic in your talk as well?
Yeah, I would say it's been, so for context, I started at 123 West in October 2020. So I've only met 3 people in my agency in person. One of them was somebody I knew years ago, which is Scott, our CEO. So I've definitely started this whole endeavor virtually, was one. And then the second part of the challenge was, so one, going into a new agency, meeting new people, building a community through an existing agency. But part of my role was also to expand 123 West, having a presence in Toronto. How do you create a presence when you don't have an office? I was an employee of 1 back then in Toronto. We're now 5, and we're hiring more. So the adjustment was definitely a big thing to overcome. But I would say the benefit of starting an agency in a pandemic was actually, because everything is virtual, it didn't feel like there was, a Toronto office and a Vancouver office. It felt like we were one agency. So that was super helpful. It was also helpful, in terms of co-collaborating. It was a lot easier, just because people weren't in offices, they were at home. So I would say like that was the benefit. The other challenge for me, to be honest, was more of my mental health, and all of the stresses behind that. This is as a creative person, there's so much pressure to always be original, be new, to think on the spot. And I think over the last year, my moods have always gone up and down, and I couldn't really tell what I was feeling the next day, or couldn't anticipate. And so for me, what was important was, how do I, one, keep fostering that like creative drive? So painting has really helped a lot. Like during the pandemic, like I've just been painting a lot, which is amazing. So that's been helpful. But yeah, for me, the toughest challenge was that more that mental strain, I would say, mental and emotional strain, rather than the business part of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think a lot of us have also felt like that quarantine fatigue, on top of like being a perfectionist within design. I think that's something that we we tend to do with ourselves, and we just have that desire to be perfectionists. And with that, I wanted to ask, now at your role at 123 West, you also teach part-time at Miami Ad School, and you're an active member at ADCC. So how have you balanced multiple responsibilities during the pandemic? And do you have any tips for designers who like to multitask, like myself?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I feel like designers do this. We like having our hands in multiple things, and having side projects. So one of the things I'm working on right now is my time management skills. So for me, what benefits? So as much I say this a lot, that I'm a big supporter of mentorship. So I actually have a coach. I have an executive coach who's my mentor. I also have other mentors outside of that. But for me, what's been helpful in having a coach is they can, I also look at them for advice on how to navigate and manage my time. So that's one. One of the things that I'm working on is the ability. I love that this conference is about saying yes, but the ability of saying no is what I'm working on. I'm one of those people that I get really excited about opportunities. I get really excited about talking to people, and I say yes a lot to a lot of things. And for me, it's prioritizing things that make me happy, and through that lens, and then saying no to things that I think will be a detriment to my overall mental and emotional health. So yeah, I would say the art of saying no is a very difficult thing to tackle. But just being able to recognize that it is okay to say no.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We have time for one last question before we go, and it's coming from the audience. So Mary asks, how do you think a potential applicant could possibly show their personality when applying for a job online during presentation?
That is a great question. So there's a few ways to do this, both in your resume and in your portfolio. So one, for example, in your resume, portfolio, or your website, there's typically like an about us, about me page. So you can write, you could describe who you are in terms of a biography, but also add in things that make you feel that showcases your personality and what you're interested in. So that's one. The other part, as well as, I personally love seeing this in work and student work or people's portfolios, is including your side projects, all the things that you're passionate about. So for example, if I were to share my book, I'll have my portfolio catered to that studio or agency, but the back half of that is actually showcasing my love for typography. I put that in there, my love for art, so I put my artwork in there. I'm also part of SAG Collective, so then I also put that there. So things that make you, what makes you whole, I would say share it. Definitely curate, but that's how you could add personality to your work. The one thing that I will say this, and I know that maybe some people are going to be split on this opinion, don't add personality in terms of over designing your brand. Sometimes student portfolios redesign and over design their portfolios to a point where like the body of work is this small and all the flourishes have so much personality. So that's the no part of adding personality. I say show restraint. When I look at your resumes and your portfolios, I look at your restraint in typography, your sophistication for that, and understanding of hierarchy and negative space and design sensibilities. But don't overbrand yourself trying to capture that personality. I think your work will speak to that. And then the last thing I would say is only put in work that you're passionate about and work that you're having fun in, you had fun with. So for example, when I work with designers, I could tell right away when they're not having fun in a project. It shows in the work. And when I look at the work, that's the first thing I ask. I'm like, did you have fun in this project? And they're like, nah. And I was like, I could see it. And I think that's a testament to your work. I look at my own body of work, and the ones that I'm just like, nah, like I wasn't really feeling it, I definitely remove from your book.
Thank you so much for that advice.
No
Okay, I
problem.
think we have to wrap it up now. Thank you so much, Mo, for an amazing talk and all of the advice that you've shared. I just want to remind everybody to visit our website to see more graduate work, yes.schooldesign.ca. We have our next guest speaker, Susie Shudin, at 2 o'clock, which is right now. And don't forget to follow us on SOD_yes. I personally run the account, so I will personally share all of the things that you're putting online. So thank you again, Mo. And
thank you so much, Jasmine.
Thank you.
You asked such amazing questions, so thank you for that. And thank you, Anna, and everybody else.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thank you so much, Mo.
Take care. Bye, everyone.